We're coming into the end of the week, Elizabeth. Most of the major retailers have reported. We've had retail sales. What is your takeaway from what we've learned?
Yeah, my guess is that under the covers, the companies that are reporting better results are the ones that have been able to manage the inventory glut a little bit better. I was a little bit surprised to see the differentiation between the Walmart and the Target performance. But my guess is that underneath, Walmart managed to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of managing their inventory forecast. They're tremendous at managing their supplier network. So it seems that that might be one of the reasons why we see such profound differences in the performance of those two organizations. They're all in the same boat. Maybe Home Depot a little bit less. I'm not sure they're as much of a participant in the holiday season. But the big box stores and the specialty retailers are all preparing for the holiday season. So the criticality of the movement of this inventory out of warehouses is becoming more and more important just because the holiday products are coming into the stores, virtually as we speak.
Well, also then it relies on getting demand right. And that's where I'm been very confused over the last couple weeks. And I think Jeffries had a note out yesterday, and they really summarized that for me, so I wanted to read it to you. It said, while the consumer sentiment is now firmly in recession territory, consumers are not following through on their feelings. They're spending based on their finances, which are still very healthy. Do you think that that difference is going to continue? And if you're a retailer, how do you look at that and say, oh, I know exactly what to do for the next 6 months?
It's super, super hard. I think we had a little bit of an improvement in consumer sentiment, but you're right. Really, for at least the last year, there's been a real difference between how we feel as consumers and what we do as consumers. And, I think the secret is going to be for retailers just to be much more responsive to the data that they're getting, to be able to sense the consumer changes and respond. So having that sort of data collection and being able to sort of turn on a dime is going to be really important. The other thing, we've talked about supply chain for a couple of years, I think at this point. There's a fundamental change in how retailers are optimizing their supply chain to give them a little bit more flexibility and agility. Over the past 10 years, maybe even more, it has all been low-cost supply chain. Now we know where low cost has gotten us, and we need to start thinking agility and being able to respond to a change in consumer demand. And that's going to happen until we have a couple of quarters of consumer behavior that can be taken into account with the retailers and all of their planning mechanisms. We have seen some interesting data on back to school, where the back to school buying behavior curves are lining up with the traditional ones. So we're seeing some normalization there. But between the recession and COVID and supply chain challenges, the rest of the consumer data hasn't really settled down yet.
Elizabeth, let's say gas prices go back up to, say, circa $4.50. How does that change the picture?
Well, I think the thing with gas prices is everybody gets in their car or, on the bus or whatever, and you see those prices. And that changes sentiment pretty aggressively, right? I mean, you're just reminded block after block after block when you see those numbers going up. So a lot of the, recessionary fears can be really self-inflicted at some point. So we get a little bit of a boost when we see those numbers going down. I think the sentiment then is more positive and firms up. But it's just very much dependent sort of on how those winds blow and how the consumer responds. It's always interesting when there's stories about how the consumer feels that they're spending double what they have in terms of grocery, and then you look at the data and maybe it's up 20%, which is still a lot, but it's very hard to align how how consumers feel about the items they're buying and the prices they're paying. Nobody's really comparing those receipts at the kitchen table, but everybody knows it feels bad.
Where do we stand on consumer credit? And when do you get worried and tell retailers guys, we're going to run into a problem with people being able to buy stuff?
Yeah, sometimes it's not that big an issue to the retailer. It's more of a banking issue. Most retailers may benefit from some sort of branded relationship that they have with a credit card. Many specialty retailers have exactly that. So they don't necessarily worry at these earlier stages. more of a banking and financial services issue. I think the concern is when there's a big tap out and the credit situation is more of a credit crunch. Right now, I think we're at the earlier stage of that curve, so it's just something to monitor and once again collect data on so that retailers understand where the consumer's head's at.
Elizabeth, what do you think is going to be big this Christmas? What trends should we be looking at? Trying to understand the consumer at the moment is very difficult, but even at this early stage, is it possible to get an idea?
Oh, it's awfully hard to know. It'd be a tough job these days to have a merchandise planning job at a retailer. I think I'm reflecting back on, coming off of this travel season. I think we're still catching up on experiences. And that's not going to benefit retailers quite as much. It's going to, be really the push continuing on, and then all the challenges we see in the execution with the airlines and the pricing on hotels. We are seeing a little bit of a replenishment cycle, though. So people who are, sort of emerging from home and coming out of quarantine. When we see the back to office initiatives, it makes me think that there's going to be some improvements in terms of apparel. As we go through the whole process of I can't, go back to the office and wear this same, dress or pants or whatever. So we may see some bump then in apparel, I think, for this holiday season.